My name is Rex, and I'm 28 years old. After my tech startup crashed during the pandemic, I reluctantly moved back in with my parents to rebuild my life. What started as a temporary arrangement became 9 months of me paying most household bills while being treated like a failure. Last night at our Christmas dinner, my father announced to our entire extended family that I was a burden and needed to move out by New Year's. Before I tell you how my life completely changed that Christmas night, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. You'll want to stick around for what happened when I finally stood up for myself. Growing up as the eldest son in our middle-class family in suburban Chicago shaped much of who I am today. Our 2-story colonial house on Maple Street looked perfect from the outside. Manicured lawn American flag, waving proudly, and a basketball hoop over the garage that rarely saw use after I left for college. Inside those walls, though, a different story unfolded daily. My father, Frank, worked as a financial manager at a respected firm downtown. His slicked-back hair, always perfectly combed, matched his meticulous and controlling nature. Everything in our household ran according to his standards. Dinner at 6 sharp, lawn mowed every Saturday morning, and achievements celebrated only when they matched his definition of success. My mother, Diane, taught part-time at the local elementary school, filling her remaining hours with keeping peace in our home. Her soft voice and perpetual nervous smile reflected years of deferring to my father's stronger personality. Then there was my younger sister, Amanda. At 24, she had already claimed the title of family success story. Her fashion design career in New York, complete with Manhattan apartment and celebrity clients, represented everything my father valued: status recognition and financial independence. Her photos dominated our living room mantel, while my college graduation picture sat on a side table partially hidden behind a decorative vase. I wasn't always the family disappointment. Throughout high school, I maintained straight A's, captained the debate team, and earned a full scholarship to Northwestern's business program. My father bragged about me, then introducing me as my son, the future CEO at neighborhood barbecues. I believed in that future too, working tirelessly through undergraduate and MBA programs fueled by entrepreneurial dreams and genuine passion for technology. After graduation, with my father's reluctant blessing, he'd preferred I take a stable corporate job. I launched my tech startup focusing on sustainable supply chain solutions. For 2 years, we grew steadily, attracting modest investment and building a team of 12 dedicated employees. Then, the pandemic hit. Our major clients slashed budgets, investors pulled out, and despite pivoting strategies and depleting my personal savings, I couldn't keep the company afloat. At 27, I found myself facing bankruptcy proceedings, letting go of employees who had become friends, and watching my dreams collapse. Moving back home was supposed to be temporary, a 1-year maximum stay, while I rebuilt my finances and professional reputation. My parents agreed, though my father made his disappointment clear through daily comments about learning valuable lessons and the stability of traditional employment. What neither of them disclosed was their own financial struggle, which I would only discover months later. I immediately began applying for jobs while taking freelance tech consulting projects. The job market remained brutal, but my consulting work gradually increased. Rather than being a burden, I actually started contributing substantially to household expenses. First, it was just groceries and utilities, but when I overheard my parents arguing about mortgage payments, I offered to cover that too. Before long, I was paying 80% of household expenses, a fact my father conveniently omitted when discussing my temporary situation with family friends. The family dynamic grew increasingly strained as months passed. My father would critique my work calls, suggesting I wasn't assertive enough with clients. He'd examine groceries I purchased, commenting on wasteful spending if I bought quality ingredients. My mother would offer sympathetic glances, but never contradicted him directly. Meanwhile, Amanda's weekly FaceTime calls from New York were treated like royal audiences, with my parents gathering eagerly around the phone to hear about her latest fashion show or celebrity encounter. Despite this environment, my consulting business showed promising growth. I had secured 3 regular clients, established a modest emergency fund, and started researching affordable apartments nearby. My plan targeted March for moving out, just 3 months away. I kept this timeline to myself knowing my father would somehow use it against me or take credit for motivating my independence. As December arrived, subtle tensions escalated. My father began making pointed comments about extended stays and adult children who overstay their welcome. When I paid the monthly bills, his acknowledgement shifted from grudging, thanks to silent acceptance, as though my financial contributions were merely expected. During our traditional family holiday movie night, he remarked that next year would look different, exchanging meaningful glances with my mother. Still, I maintained hope that Christmas might temporarily ease the household strain. I doubled my work hours, accepting every project offered to afford thoughtful gifts for everyone. I still believed I could earn my father's approval, restore his pride in me, and leave on positive terms when spring arrived. That hopeful delusion would shatter completely on Christmas Day. The weeks before Christmas found me working 14-hour days, balancing multiple client projects to earn end-of-year bonuses. My makeshift desk in the corner of my childhood bedroom became command central for video calls, coding sessions, and endless emails. When not working, I meticulously researched gifts that might finally make my family, especially my father, recognize my efforts. For my mother, I selected a sapphire pendant I'd noticed her admiring months earlier in a department store window, far beyond what she would ever purchase for herself. The moment she mentioned liking it, I began setting aside money each week, even when it meant skipping lunches. For Amanda, I chose a rare vintage designer scarf from a collector I'd tracked down through my college roommate's connections. And for my father, after weeks of deliberation, I purchased a limited edition watch from his favorite luxury brand, investing nearly $2,000. I couldn't really spare, but hoping this tangible symbol of success might change how he saw me. The Saturday before Christmas, I ventured out to the crowded mall for last-minute wrapping supplies, overhearing countless conversations between adult children and their parents. Easy banter, shared jokes, mutual respect that highlighted the abnormality of my own family dynamic. I selected premium wrapping paper, ribbons, and gift bags, determined that presentation would reflect the thought behind each gift. Our house transformed into Holiday Central that week. I hung outdoor lights along the roof and porch, a task my father claimed his back pain prevented him from doing, though it didn't stop him from supervising from below, pointing out missed spots and crooked strands. Inside, my mother directed the decoration of our 12-foot tree, though I did the actual work of arranging ornaments and untangling light strings, while she nervously checked whether each placement would meet my father's approval. 3 days before Christmas, Amanda arrived from New York, bringing with her a tornado of excitement and designer luggage. Her boyfriend Maxwell, a tall finance executive with perfectly tailored clothes and a perpetual smirk, accompanied her. Their presence immediately shifted the household atmosphere. My father's perpetual frown softened my mother's nervous cleaning. Frenzy intensified, and I became instantly invisible. "Daddy, you look wonderful. Have you lost weight?" Amanda squealed, embracing our father in the foyer. He beamed proudly, patting his stomach. "Just watching what I eat, princess." Unlike some people who raid the refrigerator at midnight, he replied, glancing meaningfully toward me, as I carried their luggage upstairs. The fact that I paid for all the groceries in that refrigerator remained unmentioned. That evening, as I prepared the guest bedroom for my aunt and uncle's arrival the following day, I overheard my father in his study with Maxwell and Amanda. Through the partially open door, I caught fragments of conversation that stung more than they should have. "Rex always had potential, but he lacks that killer instinct," my father explained in his authoritative boardroom voice. "Amanda understood from day one what it takes to succeed." "Some people just aren't cut out for entrepreneurship," Maxwell responded with the confidence of someone whose father's connections had secured his first 3 jobs. "The corporate safety net exists for a reason." Their laughter mingled with the clinking of my father's expensive scotch, the bottle I had purchased for the holidays. Christmas Eve brought the arrival of extended family, my father's brother Uncle Philip and his wife Aunt Margaret, their college-age twins Zachary and Zoe, and my mother's sister Aunt Clara. Their presence filled our house with the chaotic energy of genuine family warmth, temporarily masking the underlying tension. I threw myself into hosting duties, mixing drinks, taking coats, and ensuring everyone had comfortable seating. The kitchen became my refuge, as I prepared most of our Christmas Eve dinner, An elaborate spread of appetizers, roasted prime rib, garlic, mashed potatoes, and homemade desserts. Cooking had always been my escape, a creative outlet, where results were tangible and appreciation immediate. My mother fluttered around the edges of my work, occasionally offering help, but mostly ensuring nothing would displease my father. "Everything smells incredible," Rex, my cousin Zoe, commented, perching on a kitchen stool as I glazed the chocolate Yule log cake. "You should have been a chef instead of a tech guy." "Thanks," I smiled, appreciating her genuine compliment. "Maybe in my next life." "Seriously, you've got talent. Are you thinking about any new business ventures yet? Something in food, perhaps?" Before I could answer, my father appeared in the doorway, drink in hand. "Rex needs to focus on stability right now, not more risky ventures. One failed business is enough of a life lesson, isn't it, son?" The kitchen fell silent. Zoe looked uncomfortable, and I focused intently on the cake decoration, swallowing the ready defense that rose to my lips. This wasn't the time for confrontation. Dinner itself proved surprisingly pleasant, with Uncle Philip's boisterous stories dominating conversation. For a brief moment, as my father complimented the perfectly cooked prime rib without acknowledging who had prepared it, I allowed myself to hope that Christmas Day might actually bring the family connection I'd been craving. As our relatives retired to their hotel rooms and Amanda and Maxwell disappeared upstairs, I stayed behind to clean the kitchen and prepare for tomorrow's even larger feast. My mother lingered, helping put away leftovers. "You've done so much, Rex," she said softly, avoiding my eyes. "The dinner was wonderful." "Thanks, Mom." I waited, hoping for more. Perhaps a defense against my father's earlier comments or acknowledgement of my broader contributions to the household. "Your father is just concerned about your future," she offered, instead her standard response to his behavior. "He wants what's best for you." "Does he?" I couldn't help asking. "Or does he want what makes him look best to others?" She flinched slightly, then patted my arm. "Try to make Christmas pleasant, dear. It's important to him that everything appears perfect tomorrow when the neighbors stop by." Her choice of words, "appears perfect," captured our family dynamic perfectly. But still, as I finally fell into bed that night, I allowed myself one last hope that Christmas Day might somehow heal our fractured relationships. I spent Christmas morning cooking, while everyone else opened small gifts, and enjoyed mimosas in the living room. The 20-pound turkey, maple-glazed ham, 5 side dishes, and 3 desserts required careful timing and attention. But I welcomed the distraction from my father's holding court with the neighbors who stopped by for Christmas. Morning cocktails. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see him gesturing expansively, telling animated stories that drew appreciative laughter, carefully cultivating his image as the successful patriarch of a thriving family. As I mashed potatoes with perhaps more force than necessary, I reminded myself that in a few months I'd be in my own apartment building, my consulting business, creating distance from this dynamic. I just needed to make it through this one day. Christmas dinner represented the pinnacle of holiday tradition in our family. The dining room transformed into a showcase of my mother's best china crystal glassware and sterling silver candelabras passed down through generations. I had spent hours perfecting each dish, from the golden brown turkey to the scratch-made cranberry sauce handcrafted dinner rolls and my grandmother's secret recipe stuffing. The table groaned under the weight of the feast, and despite everything, I felt a flicker of pride at creating something beautiful. Our extended family gathered around the table. Uncle Philip and Aunt Margaret, the twins Aunt Clara, and of course my parents, Amanda and Maxwell. Conversation flowed alongside generous pours of wine, covering safe topics like the twins' college experiences and Aunt Clara's recent Mediterranean cruise. I remained mostly silent, focusing on ensuring everyone's plates and glasses stayed full, playing the perfect host while fighting exhaustion from days of preparation. The shift in atmosphere happened gradually, beginning when Aunt Margaret innocently asked about my living situation. "So Rex, are you planning to get your own place soon? Your consulting business seems to be picking up." Before I could answer, my father cleared his throat, setting down his fork with deliberate precision. The slight tightening around his eyes signaled the expression I'd come to recognize as his public disciplinary face, the look that maintained his dignified image while delivering carefully crafted criticism. "Actually, Margaret, we were just discussing that very topic last week," He began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he typically reserved for important pronouncements. Rex's temporary arrangement has extended rather longer than anticipated. I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach as conversation around the table quieted. Amanda shot me a quick glance before becoming intensely interested in cutting her turkey into precise bites. "Well, the job market has been challenging," Aunt Clara offered kindly, "and family supporting each other is what matters, isn't it?" My father nodded with exaggerated patience. Of course, family support is essential, but at some point supporting becomes enabling. Rex is approaching 30, and continuing to burden us with his presence isn't helping his development as an independent adult. The word burden landed like a physical blow. I froze mid-motion, water pitcher suspended above Uncle Philip's glass. "Frank," my mother murmured cautiously, her eyes darting nervously around the table. "No, Diane, this needs to be said. We've discussed it privately, and now it's time to be transparent with the family." My father straightened his shoulders, addressing the table as though delivering a corporate announcement. "We've decided that Rex needs to be out of the house by January 1st. A clean break for the new year. It's ultimately for his own good." The dining room fell silent, except for the soft classical music playing from the living room speakers. I carefully set down the water pitcher, acutely aware of every eye at the table fixed either on me or deliberately avoiding my gaze. "I don't think Christmas dinner is the appropriate," Uncle Philip began. But my father cut him off with a raised hand. "Philip, when you've raised children to successful independence, as we have with Amanda," he nodded toward my sister, who looked uncomfortably at her plate, "you understand that sometimes firm deadlines are necessary. Rex's business failed because he lacks discipline and proper planning. His continuing to live here without clear consequences only reinforces poor habits." Each word struck with precision, crafted to wound while maintaining the veneer of parental concern. The carefully constructed illusion that I had been freeloading, rather than financially supporting the household, hung in the air, unchallenged. "Dad, maybe we could discuss this later," Amanda suggested, finally looking up from her meticulously arranged food. "There's nothing to discuss," he replied firmly. "January 1st. I've already outlined this to Rex privately." This was an outright lie. No such conversation had occurred, but contradicting him publicly would only escalate the humiliation. I sat perfectly still, maintaining composure through sheer force of will, as he continued elaborating on my failures to our captive audience. "The truth is," he continued, warming to his topic, as though delivering a rehearsed speech, "continuing to provide housing at his age creates dependency. When I was 28, I had already purchased our first home, had Amanda on the way, and was on track for my first promotion. I found my voice, though it emerged quieter than intended. I've been contributing to household expenses while building my business." My father waved dismissively. "Paying nominal rent doesn't compare to establishing true independence. The arrangement has become increasingly burdensome for your mother, who's too kind to say so." My mother stared intently at her plate, saying nothing to contradict this characterization. Maxwell, clearly uncomfortable, but unable to resist participating, offered his unwanted perspective. "Property values in Chicago are actually quite reasonable compared to New York. I could recommend some entry-level options that might be suitable." "Excellent suggestion." My father beamed at him approvingly. "See, Rex Maxwell understands practical solutions." The remainder of dinner proceeded in excruciating slowness. Conversation eventually resumed around safer topics, though notably subdued. I mechanically served dessert, the elaborate bûche de Noël I'd spent hours creating, while maintaining a mask of calm dignity that drained every ounce of my emotional energy. As coffee was served, I quietly excused myself. "I need to check something in the kitchen." No one objected or offered to help, perhaps relieved by my absence. Once past the swinging door, I leaned against the counter hands, gripping the edge, until my knuckles whitened. The systematic dismantling of my character in front of our extended family, presented as concerned parenting rather than the cruel public humiliation it was replayed in my mind. I didn't return to the dining room. Instead, I slipped upstairs to my bedroom, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. Through the floor I could hear muffled conversation, resuming occasional laughter the evening, continuing without disruption. The presents I'd carefully selected remained unwrapped under the tree downstairs. The sapphire pendant vintage scarf and luxury watch now seemed like pathetic attempts to purchase respect I'd never receive. For 9 months, I had maintained the illusion that my situation was temporary, normal, and improving. In a single dinner announcement, my father had stripped away that comforting fiction. As midnight approached, and the house finally quieted, I remained sitting in darkness, a strange calm, replacing the initial shock as I realized this Christmas had given me an unexpected gift after all: absolute clarity. The digital clock on my nightstand silently marked the passing hours as Christmas Day faded into December 26th, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Sleep never came. Instead, I found myself methodically reviewing my entire life through a newly clarified lens, particularly my relationship with my father. Memories surfaced with uncomfortable precision. My 10th birthday, when the computer I'd asked for was withheld because my math grade dropped from an A to an A-. High school debate championship, where my father's only comment concerned the second-place team's stronger opening statement. College graduation, when my summa cum laude honors were acknowledged with. Now the real work begins. Each memory formed a pattern I'd normalized for decades. I opened my laptop and navigated to my financial records, creating a spreadsheet to systematically track every penny I'd contributed to the household since moving back. The numbers told a story far different from the one my father had presented at dinner. Mortgage payments, $7,200 over 8 months. Utilities, nearly $4,000. Groceries, approximately $600 monthly. Home repairs, including a new water heater and roof patching, $8,000. Insurance premiums I'd quietly covered when I overheard my parents arguing about missed payments, $3,000. The total stunned me: over $30,000 in 9 months. Far from being a burden, I had become the primary financial support for a household that treated me as an embarrassing charity case. The spreadsheet brought clarity beyond the emotional impact of dinner. This wasn't just about hurt feelings or damaged pride. I had been systematically exploited while being publicly demeaned. I dug deeper into the household files I had access to, discovering troubling patterns. Credit card statements showed increasing balances despite my covering most expenses. Bank accounts showed steadily declining balances before my arrival, then stabilization after I began contributing. Most tellingly, a letter from my father's company, carelessly left in the home office printer, referenced his separation package from 6 months ago. He hadn't been employed during most of my stay, but had maintained the fiction of going to work each day. This revelation transformed everything. My father's increasing hostility correlated perfectly with his increasing dependency on my financial support. His determination to push me out by January suddenly made less sense, unless he had another financial solution in place. Or perhaps I realized with growing certainty he simply couldn't maintain the psychological burden of his dependency on the son he'd deemed a failure. Around 5 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Amanda. Dad went too far tonight. You okay? Her message, while acknowledging the inappropriate nature of the dinner announcement, offered no real support or solution. I didn't respond. Moments later, a soft knock at my door revealed my mother, still in her Christmas dress, looking exhausted. Rex, are you awake? She whispered, easing the door open slightly. Yes, I answered flatly, not moving from my desk, where spreadsheets filled my screen. She entered hesitantly, perching on the edge of my bed. Your father sometimes says things without thinking about how they sound. He doesn't mean to be harsh. Doesn't he? Her eyes darted to my laptop screen, then away quickly. He's been under a lot of pressure lately. I know, I replied. He lost his job 6 months ago. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed what the documents had already told me. He didn't want anyone to know. His pride. His pride, I repeated the words, taking on new meaning. His pride has been fine with taking my money while pretending I'm a burden. His pride was fine with announcing to our entire family that I'm a failure who needs to be kicked out while I've been paying for the roof over his head. It's complicated, she offered weakly. Actually, Mom, it's suddenly very simple. She reached for my hand, but I gently pulled away, turning back to my laptop. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, she stood. Try to get some sleep, she suggested, as though insufficient rest explained my perspective rather than newfound clarity. After she left, I opened a new browser tab and began researching apartments. Not for March, as originally planned, but immediately. I texted several friends explaining I needed temporary housing within the next 48 hours. By dawn, I had 3 offers with my college friend Michael, offering his spare room indefinitely. As the first light of morning illuminated my childhood bedroom, I felt a strange sense of peace, replacing the hurt and anger. For years I had measured my worth through my father's impossible standards, seeking approval that was strategically withheld to maintain control. The failed business had shaken my professional confidence. But this Christmas dinner had paradoxically restored something more important: my sense of self-worth, independent of his validation. I watched the sunrise paint the snow-covered backyard in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I saw my path forward with perfect clarity. I would leave today, not with shame as my father intended, but with dignity and the calm strength that comes from recognizing one's true value. The business I was rebuilding would continue growing. The family dynamic I was leaving would no longer define me. As birds began their morning songs outside my window, I started packing methodically and purposefully. The time for seeking validation was over. The time for reclaiming my life had begun. Dawn found me already organizing my possessions into carefully considered categories. Essential items for immediate relocation, laptop business documents, clothing for 2 weeks, toiletries, and the few sentimental objects that truly mattered. My grandfather's pocket watch journal collection and the small bronze Entrepreneur of the Year award from my company's brief success. Secondary items that could be retrieved later. Books, additional clothing, desk equipment, items to be donated or discarded, college textbooks, outdated electronics, childhood memorabilia that no longer served any purpose except occupying space. Michael had confirmed I could move into his spare room that afternoon. Stay as long as you need, man. Got plenty of space and could use the company. His text read a simple kindness that contrasted sharply with my current living situation. I'd known Michael since freshman year of college. Straightforward, reliable, and refreshingly free of hidden agendas. I heard my father's heavy footsteps in the hallway around 7:30, his typical morning routine, unchanged despite yesterday's dramatic pronouncement. He paused briefly outside my door, perhaps noting the light and movement within, but continued without knocking. Minutes later, the familiar sounds of coffee brewing and newspaper pages turning drifted up from the kitchen, the performance of normalcy that had become his specialty. By 9 o'clock, I had filled 3 large suitcases and several boxes. As I methodically wrapped my computer monitors in bubble wrap, my mother appeared in the doorway, her expression shifting from surprise to concern as she surveyed the extensive packing. "You're not leaving today, are you?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Your father said January 1st. There's still time to talk this through." I continued wrapping cables, keeping my voice neutral. "I think we both know there's nothing to discuss. Yesterday made everything very clear." He was just frustrated. Christmas always stresses him, and with company watching, he sometimes overcompensates with. She trailed off, unable to find a palatable euphemism for his behavior. With public humiliation, I supplied calmly. With lies about our financial arrangement, her eyes darted nervously toward the stairs, checking whether my father might overhear. He doesn't see it that way. I'm sure he doesn't. I sealed a box with packing tape, the sharp ripping sound punctuating our conversation. But facts don't change based on his perspective. I've been subsidizing this household for months, while being treated like an unwelcome guest. She stepped further into the room, closing the door partially behind her. What about your plan to move in spring? You mentioned looking for places in March. Plans change. Yesterday's dinner made it clear I'm not welcome, so I'm respecting that declaration. I labeled the box office supplies in neat block letters. Michael has a spare room ready for me. I'll be out of your way by this afternoon. Rex, please. Your father didn't mean. Mom, I interrupted gently but firmly. We both know exactly what he meant. He's been perfectly clear for months. The only difference is that now I'm listening. She twisted her wedding ring anxiously, a nervous habit I'd observed throughout my childhood during particularly stressful family moments. Where will you go after Michael's clank? End of clase. I'm viewing an apartment at noon. My credit score is excellent, and I have sufficient savings for security deposit and first month's rent. The fact that those savings would have been considerably larger had I not been covering household expenses remained tactfully unstated. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda heading back to NYC early. Maxwell has a work thing. Talk soon. The convenient escape was perfectly in character. I didn't bother responding. My mother hovered uncertainly as I continued packing. You haven't opened your Christmas presents, she noted, gesturing toward the small pile I'd moved from under the tree to my desk. I'll take them with me, I replied, though. We both knew the carefully selected gifts would likely remain unopened, too laden with complicated emotions to enjoy. Around 10:30, I took a break from packing to call the landlord of a promising apartment I'd found online. The property manager, hearing my situation, agreed to meet me at noon for an immediate viewing. I've got all the application paperwork ready. If everything checks out, we could have you approved by end of day, she offered. Shortly before 11, my father appeared in my doorway, coffee mug in hand, surveying the packed boxes with an expression somewhere between satisfaction and suspicion. So, you're actually taking our conversation seriously, he remarked, as though yesterday's public announcement had been a casual suggestion rather than a humiliating decree. Yes, I replied, simply continuing to pack my books. He nodded, taking a slow sip of coffee. Good. Independence will build character. Where are you headed? I've got temporary arrangements, and I'm viewing a permanent place today. His eyebrows rose slightly. That was fast. Got the funds for deposits, and such landlords aren't charity organizations. The irony of his concern about financial responsibility was almost laughable. I've managed my finances carefully, even while covering substantial household expenses here. A flicker of something, perhaps discomfort or even guilt, crossed his face before the familiar mask of authority returned. Well, those contributions were in lieu of proper rent, which would have been considerably higher on the open market. Consider it a valuable lesson in household economics. Rather than engaging with this blatant rewriting of our arrangement, I changed the subject. I've arranged for a moving truck tomorrow for the remaining items. I'll be out completely by evening. Tomorrow. For the first time, he appeared genuinely surprised. The first is still a week away. I see no reason to delay, I responded, maintaining the calm, businesslike tone that seemed to unsettle him far more than anger would have. Since my presence is burdensome, immediate departure seems most considerate. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with how smoothly I was executing a departure he had intended to be challenging. Your mother prepared a whole week of meals. There's no need to be dramatic about this. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being efficient. I closed another box and labeled it. Exactly as you've always advised. He lingered a moment longer, perhaps waiting for the emotional outburst, or pleading that would reestablish his position of power. When neither came, he muttered something about checking the furnace and disappeared downstairs. At 11:30, I carried the first load of suitcases to my car. Amanda's text remained unanswered. My mother had retreated to nervous cleaning in the kitchen, and my father had sequestered himself in his study. The beautiful Christmas decorations still adorned every surface, the ironic backdrop to this decidedly unfestive departure. As I prepared to leave for my apartment viewing, I discovered one final relevant document in the home office printer tray. A past due notice for the January mortgage payment, highlighted in alarming red text. This wasn't just about emotional manipulation. There were serious financial implications to my departure that my father hadn't considered in his determination to maintain his pride at my expense. I folded the notice carefully and placed it in my wallet. The time for a frank financial discussion was approaching, but first I needed to secure my own stability. I texted Michael that I'd be arriving with my first load of possessions around 3, then headed out to view what would become my new home, leaving the suffocating atmosphere of false appearances behind. The apartment viewing proved surprisingly straightforward. The one-bedroom unit in a renovated brownstone offered hardwood floors, updated appliances, and most importantly, distance from my parents' home while remaining in the same city for my growing client base. My excellent credit score and income verification from established clients satisfied the property manager who processed my application on the spot. By 2 o'clock, I had signed a lease beginning January 1st, with permission to move some items in immediately. "You're lucky," she commented as I signed the final paperwork. The previous tenant gave notice right before Christmas. Most people aren't looking until after New Year's. "Sometimes timing works out perfectly," I replied, feeling the first genuine smile in days spread across my face as she handed me the keys. By 4:30, I had transported essential belongings to both Michael's spare room and the new apartment. The physical labor of carrying boxes up and down stairs provided a welcome outlet for the emotional energy I'd been carefully containing. Michael helped with the heavier items, asking few questions, but offering solid support through his presence and occasional dad jokes. "So family Christmas went nuclear, huh?" he asked, as we arranged my desk in the corner of his guest room. "You could say that. Want to talk about it? Or would you prefer to order obscene amounts of pizza and not talk about it?" I laughed for what felt like the first time in months. Pizza first, then maybe talking. By 7 o'clock, I returned to my parents' house for a final evening load, and the conversation I'd been mentally preparing for all day. The Christmas tree lights still twinkled in the living room window, a jarringly festive contrast to the heavy atmosphere inside. My parents sat in uncomfortable silence in the kitchen, the remains of a barely touched dinner, pushed to one side of the table. "Rex," my mother started, rising anxiously as I entered. "We saved dinner for you." "I've eaten, thanks," I replied, setting my empty duffel bags on the floor. "I need to speak with both of you before I get the rest of my things." My father looked up from his untouched plate, his expression unreadable. "If this is about extending your stay, we've been clear about." "It's not," I interrupted, pulling out a chair across from them. "It's about financial transparency." I placed my laptop on the table and opened the spreadsheet I'd created overnight, turning the screen to face them. "This is a complete accounting of my financial contributions to this household over the past 9 months." My mother's eyes widened as she scanned the detailed figures. My father's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "As you can see," I continued evenly, "I've contributed $34,526.14 to this household since April. This includes mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, insurance premiums, and home repairs." "That was our arrangement," my father finally responded, though his voice lacked its usual authoritative edge. "You were living here." "No, our arrangement was that I would stay temporarily while rebuilding my business. There was never an agreement that I would become the primary financial support for this household." I scrolled through the spreadsheet, highlighting specific entries. Particularly interesting is the timing of when my contributions increased, precisely when you lost your position at Meridian Financial, Dad. The color drained from his face. My mother reached for his hand, which remained rigidly clenched on the table. "You had no right to investigate our personal—" "I didn't investigate anything," I clarified. "You left your separation notice in the printer. The mortgage past due notices were in the mail I sorted every week. The credit card statements were in the bills I paid." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't want to burden you with our problems. You were already dealing with so much after your business. Instead, you allowed me to take on financial responsibility while maintaining the fiction that I was the burden." I kept my voice level, though my hands trembled slightly. "Yesterday's dinner announcement makes even less sense now. If I move out completely as directed, who will pay these bills in January?" The kitchen fell into heavy silence, broken only by the gentle hum of the refrigerator, another appliance I had recently paid to repair. "Your father has several promising interviews after the new year," my mother finally offered weakly. "In this economy, at his age—" The words came out harsher than intended, and I took a deep breath to recenter myself. "I'm not here to argue. I've already signed a lease on a new apartment effective January 1st. I'll be completely moved out by tomorrow evening as promised." My father's facade finally cracked. "You can't possibly have found and secured an apartment in one day." "I did. The lease is signed, and the first month's rent and security deposit paid." I turned the laptop screen back toward me. "But there's another matter we need to discuss." I pulled the past due mortgage notice from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. "This is due in 1 week. There's also the property tax installment coming due in February, and based on the credit card statements, approximately $18,000 in high-interest debt that's been accumulating. My father stared at the mortgage notice, as though it might disappear if he glared at it hard enough. My mother's tears now flowed freely. "We'll manage," my father insisted, though his voice had lost all conviction. "How?" I asked simply. "Social Security doesn't cover these expenses. Your severance appears to have ended months ago." Amanda is unaware of the situation and focused on her own career. "Where will the money come from?" "That's not your concern anymore," he snapped, a desperate attempt to reclaim authority. "You've made your decision to leave." "No, Dad. You made that decision for me yesterday in front of our entire family." I closed my laptop. "I'm not here to gloat or punish you. I'm here because, despite everything, you're still my parents." My mother looked up hopefully. But I continued firmly, "I won't continue to be exploited financially while being treated as a disappointment. That arrangement ends today." "What are you saying?" my father asked, his voice barely audible. "I'm saying I'll help establish a sustainable financial plan for you both, but on my terms, with complete transparency and basic respect." "We don't need charity," he protested weakly. "This isn't charity, it's family helping family. The concept you referenced at dinner, remember. But it requires honesty about your situation and acknowledgement of my contributions." The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Finally, my father's shoulders slumped, the carefully maintained posture of authority collapsing under the weight of reality. "I lost everything," he admitted, voice cracking. 32 years at the company, and they replaced me with someone half my age at half my salary. The severance barely lasted 3 months. I've applied to 67 positions since June. The naked vulnerability in his confession struck me more powerfully than any of his previous criticisms. For the first time, I saw not the infallible patriarch he'd always portrayed, but a frightened man in his early 60s facing the collapse of his identity and financial security. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, the anger in my voice giving way to genuine confusion. "How could I?" he responded, looking up with reddened eyes. "You've looked up to me your entire life. I was supposed to be the successful one, the example. Then your business failed, and you moved home, and suddenly you were bouncing back, creating new opportunities, while I couldn't even get interviews. Every day you grew stronger, while I became more irrelevant. So, yesterday's announcement was what reasserting control, pushing me away before I could discover the truth." He nodded slowly. "I couldn't bear your pity. Better you think me cruel than broken." My mother reached across the table toward me. "We should have been honest. I wanted to tell you, but your father was so ashamed. And then you started paying bills without us even asking, and it just became easier to accept help without acknowledging we needed it." The revelation transformed my understanding of the past 9 months. My father's increasing criticism, my mother's anxiety, the reluctance to discuss finances, all stemmed not from disappointment in me, but from their own fear and shame. "We need to establish a new relationship," I said finally. "One based on honesty, not appearances." "What does that mean, practically?" my father asked, the financial manager in him emerging through the emotional turmoil. "It means I'll help create a sustainable budget that includes some support from me while you rebuild. It means transparent discussions about finances. It means I'll still move into my new apartment, but I won't leave you facing foreclosure." And in return, his question revealed how deeply transactional his worldview remained. In return, we try to build a healthier family dynamic. No more public humiliation, no more pretending, no more treating me like a disappointment for taking entrepreneurial risks. My mother nodded eagerly. My father stared at his hands for a long moment before meeting my eyes directly. "I don't know how to be different," he admitted quietly. "I've only ever known one way to be a father or provider." "Then this is a chance to learn something new," I replied, starting with an honest conversation about January's mortgage payment. As Christmas decorations sparkled around us, we began the painful but necessary process of dismantling decades of financial fiction and emotional barriers. The path forward remained uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was built on truth rather than appearances. 1 month later, I settled into my apartment with a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The space wasn't large, a one-bedroom with an open-concept living area, but it was entirely mine. I'd furnished it minimally, but comfortably focusing on my home office setup where my consulting business continued to thrive. January had brought 2 new clients and expanded projects with existing ones, validating my decision to pursue entrepreneurship despite past setbacks. The morning light streamed through my windows as I prepared for a coffee meeting with Amanda, who had texted unexpectedly upon her return from New York for a weekend visit. We'd had minimal contact since Christmas, her initial message of sympathy following the dinner disaster giving way to silence as she processed the family's shifting dynamic from a safe distance. The coffee shop sat halfway between my apartment and our parents' home, neutral territory for what promised to be an uncomfortable conversation. Amanda arrived characteristically late designer sunglasses perched on her perfectly highlighted hair, looking simultaneously put together and exhausted. "You look good," she commented, studying me as she slid into the booth. "Independent living suits you." "Thanks. How's New York?" "Busy. Fashion Week preparations are killing me." She stirred her latte unnecessarily. "Maxwell and I broke up." This unexpected development momentarily derailed my mental script. "I'm sorry to hear that." She shrugged with practiced nonchalance. It was inevitable. He couldn't handle dating someone more successful than him. A brief, genuine smile flickered across her face. "I got the Bellamy account. My designs will be in their fall catalog." "That's amazing, Amanda. Congratulations." An awkward silence fell between us, filled with unspoken questions about the family situation she'd conveniently avoided. Finally, she sighed dramatically. "So Mom called me. Dad lost his job months ago, and you were paying their bills, and now they might lose the house." The rapid-fire questions emerged with increasing distress. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "The same reason they didn't tell me until I discovered it myself," I replied evenly. Dad's pride. Mom's conflict avoidance. The family tradition of maintaining appearances at all costs. She flinched slightly at this characterization, but didn't dispute it. She said, "You've been helping them create some kind of financial plan." I nodded. "A sustainable budget." Dad's interviewing for a part-time financial advisory position at a community bank. It's not his executive salary, but combined with their retirement savings and some support from me, they can manage. "And the mortgage?" "Current now, but it was close. They nearly missed the January payment before we restructured everything." Amanda fidgeted with her napkin. "I could contribute something monthly. My new contract is quite generous." "That would help," I acknowledged, surprised and slightly touched by her offer. "But more importantly, they need emotional support. The house looks different. Dad isn't maintaining it the way he used to. His depression is pretty evident." "Depression?" She looked genuinely shocked. "Dad doesn't get depressed. He gets angry." That anger was masking a lot, apparently. Losing his identity as the successful provider hit him harder than anyone realized. Mom says he barely leaves the house some days. Amanda's carefully maintained composure wavered. "I should have visited sooner. I just thought." She trailed off. "That it was another round of Dad being Dad," I suggested. "That's what he wanted everyone to think. Easier to be feared or resented than pitied." She nodded slowly. "Are you still angry about Christmas dinner?" I was, I admitted, but understanding the context helped. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. We spent the next hour developing a coordinated approach to supporting our parents while maintaining healthy boundaries. Amanda agreed to visit monthly, rather than just on holidays. I would continue managing their financial transition. Most importantly, we both committed to pushing for greater honesty in family communications. The following weekend, I visited my parents' house for the first time since moving out. The contrast was immediately apparent. Newspapers piled on the coffee table, a thin layer of dust on the bookshelves, the immaculate lawn, now showing neglect. My mother greeted me with nervous enthusiasm, hovering as though uncertain of the new protocols in our relationship. My father sat in his recliner, the television murmuring in the background. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging slightly loose, his once commanding presence diminished. When he saw me, he straightened a reflexive attempt to project strength. "Rex," he nodded formally. "The apartment working out?" "It is I," replied, setting down the groceries I'd brought. How was the interview yesterday? A flash of the old defensiveness crossed his face before he visibly made an effort to push it aside. Better than expected. They seemed to value my experience rather than seeing my age as a liability. That's great news, Dad. My mother busied herself putting away the groceries, the familiar nervous energy still present, but somehow less frantic. I've been looking into part-time work myself, she volunteered. The elementary school needs substitutes. This was unexpected progress, my mother seeking independence rather than orbiting anxiously around my father's moods. The three of us shared an awkward but not unpleasant lunch, carefully navigating this new territory of cautious honesty. Before leaving, I handed my father a folder containing the updated budget spreadsheet and bill payment schedule we'd developed. I've set up automatic transfers for my contribution, I explained. And there's information about that financial counseling program we discussed. He accepted the folder with a nod, then cleared his throat uncomfortably. I've been meaning to say, the Christmas announcement was inappropriate. I should have handled things differently. From my father, this halting acknowledgement represented significant progress, perhaps the closest thing to an apology his pride would currently allow. We're finding a better way forward, I replied simply. That's what matters now. 6 months later, the transformation in our family dynamics had progressed beyond what I could have imagined that Christmas night. My father secured the part-time position at the community bank, finding unexpected satisfaction in helping ordinary people navigate their finances rather than managing wealthy clients' portfolios. My mother returned to teaching 3 days a week, developing a confidence I'd rarely witnessed during my childhood. My own consulting business expanded to the point where I hired 2 part-time assistants with a client list that now included 2 Fortune 500 companies. The apartment became home decorated with carefully selected items that reflected my personality rather than my father's preferences. Perhaps most significantly, I met Eliza, an environmental lawyer, whose intelligence and genuine warmth gradually broke through the emotional walls I'd built. Our relationship developed slowly, deliberately, as I learned to trust again and share vulnerabilities without fear of judgment. 1 year after the disastrous Christmas dinner, our family gathered again around the same table, though in a configuration that would have been unimaginable 12 months earlier. My father, thinner but healthier, had abandoned his authoritarian role for a more authentic presence. My mother spoke more freely occasionally, even disagreeing openly with my father, something previously unthinkable. Amanda brought her new girlfriend, a photographer, whose creative eye and straightforward manner complemented my sister's intensity. Eliza sat beside me, her hand occasionally finding mine under the table. Most remarkably, the conversation flowed naturally without the performance of perfection that had characterized our previous gatherings. My father discussed his adjustment to part-time work with surprising candor. My mother shared amusing stories from her classroom. Amanda admitted the challenges of creative blocks in her design process. We talked about real struggles, celebrated genuine successes, and allowed authentic emotions rather than carefully curated impressions. When dinner concluded, my father asked me to help bring dessert from the kitchen, an unprecedented request that once would have been directed only to my mother or sister. I never properly thanked you, he said quietly, as we arranged pie slices on dessert plates, not just for the financial help, but for forcing us to face reality. It wasn't easy for any of us, I acknowledged. No, he agreed, meeting my eyes directly. But it was necessary. I spent decades building a life that looked successful rather than one that felt meaningful. Losing that facade was terrifying, but also, he searched for the right word, freeing, in a way I'm only beginning to understand. As we rejoined the others, I realized that the greatest gift from last year's painful Christmas wasn't just my independence or growing business success. It was the slow, imperfect emergence of authentic relationships built on truth rather than appearances, on acceptance rather than conditions, on love rather than performance. The path hadn't been easy. There had been difficult conversations, setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge, but watching my father laugh genuinely at something, Eliza said, seeing my mother confidently express an opinion without checking for approval. First, I knew we had all grown in ways that would have remained impossible without that moment of painful clarity. So what's everyone thankful for this Christmas? Amanda asked, as we raised our glasses for a toast. One by one, we shared authentic gratitudes. Not the performative platitudes of previous gatherings, but genuine reflections on growth, challenge, and connection. When my turn came, I looked around at these familiar faces, now showing new expressions of authenticity. I'm thankful for second chances, I said simply, and for the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it's terrifying. My father's eyes met mine with understanding that required no additional words. Have you ever had to make a difficult stand against family expectations? What boundaries have you established in your own life that helped relationships grow healthier rather than more toxic? Hit like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most important growth. Thanks for watching, and remember, true family support means honesty, respect, and unconditional love, not perfect appearances.